Just watch Bird's line of sight.
No, I'll go here.
Hi.
I think the exact wrong spot. Paul Friel's TV. Paul Friel's doing.
Watch
Paul
the back of
Friel's.
his neck as he turns his neck. Okay, so I'm going to get started now. So this is basically just a little tutorial on how to use Inkscape, particularly for mock-up design. And I just wanted to give you a few caveats up front. This is very much about how to use Inkscape. It's not about how to design awesome UIs. If you're interested in how to design awesome UIs and a bit more about the design process, I have a talk after this in room 6 upstairs, where I get a little bit more into the actual design process rather than actual drawing pixels on a screen. So this is very much drawing pixels on a screen. And so with that, I will start. Actually, I should say, my name is Mairin Duffy, and I'm an interaction designer with Red Hat. I do a lot of work in the Fedora community. You probably see my blog posts I post quite often. And I've been a designer for about 5 years now, every single year of which I've used Inkscape as my primary design tool. So I've grown a lot with the software as it's matured and like picked up new features. And having used it for 5 years now, specifically for mockups, I've kind of developed my own workflow in it. And it's not to say that the way I use it is the best way, but it's the way that's worked for me and I've developed it over time. So you might find some bits and pieces of this that you can develop for your own workflow style. So that being said, I just wanted to point out that you can do it. There's no magical smoke-filled incense-filled room where you have to do some kind of crazy improvisation to do mock-ups. I think a lot of people kind of look at design as this sort of, oh, well, a designer needs to do that. I can't do that. But no, you can do it. And all the tools that you need are already included in Fedora, so you don't have to pay $1,000 homage to Adobe. It's all everything you need today. And we desperately need you to do it. So not only is it a don't be afraid to do it, but it's also a matter of we need you to do it. We need more people thinking about Fedora in general free software from a design sensibility rather than a strictly functionality programming sensibility. And the way you do that is you draw mock-ups before you write a line of code, because that'll give you an idea of, well, how's the user actually going to use this thing? What does it look like? What is it going to feel like? A lot of times, fundamental problems with the software will come out just in drawing a little paper sketch of what you think it's going to look like. And it's better to figure out what problems in your design are happening when it's just a pencil sketch or a mock-up in Inkscape than when it's fully implemented and you spent hours writing code and testing it. Because again, it's great if the functionality works and it's tested and whatever, but if users have such a tough time even accessing, they won't. So it's as good as if you never implemented it in the first place. So it's very good to have a design focus, design up front. And also, the stuff that I'm going to walk you through, while it's Inkscape with a very mock-up focused bent, at the same time, this is general Inkscape uses information too. So if you're interested in using Inkscape, what I'm going to talk about will get you a little bit up to speed if you're not familiar with it. So, that being said, I have a list of topics we will go through. Some are a bit longer than others. First, we're going to take a little drive through the Inkscape UI, and then I'm going to talk about the rectangle and text tools. They are your best friends when you're doing mockups. You can do great mockups that get the job done only using those two tools. So, and I will show you how to do that. We'll go through and we'll actually create one at the end of number 4. So the third topic we'll talk about is Control D. Control D is a very useful tool in Inkscape. It saves you a lot of time, and we'll kind of go into detail about that when we get to that part. And then grouping items is also an important thing to sort of logically organize your mockups. It's not essential, but, and then number 5, save and share. Once you have these great mockups, what are you going to do with them, right? Like, they're sitting on your hard drive, they're not doing anything good, so how do you get them out there and get them in a way that you can get feedback to keep on iterating and developing? So, this room is very loud, I just want to share a screen. So, can everybody hear me? Am I doing okay? Okay, cool. So, first we're going to take a little test drive around the Inkscape UI. And I have this nice little screenshot here. And what I've done is I've circled the tools, and unfortunately they're not grouped together in the UI, but I've circled the tools that I think you're going to find the most useful when you're creating mockups. And of course, the selector tool is the tool you're going to use the most. So you're always going to want to default to this tool when you're working in Inkscape. And the selector tool is basically your little magic tool that you just click anything on the interface and it automatically selects it. And when we go through the live demo later, you'll see that quite quickly. The node edit tool, you're going to be using that a little bit less, but the node edit tool is how you tweak sort of the way shapes on the canvas are formed. So I'll give you a good example of where you're going to use the node edit tool in doing mockups. And that's if I wanted to add tabs to the top of this, what I could do is I could go into the node edit tool, click this rectangle, and I'll have the 4 nodes of the rectangle. And what I can do is when you click the node tool, it's not in the screenshot, but there's a little add node button, and I click that, and then I can drag out nodes and make it so that little hump of the tab shows up. And then what I can do is I can actually select those nodes and then drag it down to make more tabs as needed. So I'll show you that live, so don't worry about it too much right now, but just so you know what that's good for. The rectangle tool, as well as the text tool, these are the ones you're going to use the most when you're doing mockups. The rectangle tool simply draws out rectangles. And you can do a lot of different things with that. You can make them into buttons, you can make them into the actual frame of the page, you can use them for checkbox widgets, or you can just use them to kind of create a different background color behind a certain area just to sort of highlight it. So we'll go through more of that in greater depth later. The ellipse tool, as you can see here, I used it for little radio buttons, and that's really mostly what I use it for on UIs, because you don't really see a lot of circles in UIs. The gradient tool is one you don't use so much, but it's nice. You want to show, hey, some nice illustration or graphics should go here, but I'm not an artist, so. I guess I'll put it.
Okay, sorry.
It's all good. So the gradient tool you can use to just kind of create a simple gradient, and you can just kind of use that to show, hey, an awesome illustration would go here if I were an illustrator, but I'm not. So I'll just use this to show artwork needs to go here. The dropper tool is really good if you're kind of in the middle of doing this mock-up, and say you pick a particular color for this, and then you want to do another header that's the same exact color, and you pick it from that here, but maybe I picked this gray the first time, and then, oh, I picked this gray the second time, so now they're different colors. You want to make sure that they're the same color, then you just use the eyedropper tool to make sure. So that's how you would use the eyedropper tool. Then I circled this whole palette, and the palette is just, you select an object, select a color, and it inherits that color. And depending on what keys you hold down when you select the color, the object will take the color in different ways. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. I also circled this tool. There's a rotate tool, and it's a little grayed out, so I apologize, it's hard to see. But if you want to rotate things at 90-degree angles, then you can use this in either direction. And there's also horizontal flip, vertical flip. And then this tool I'm going to go over a little bit later too. But when I'm showing beginner Inkscape users how to use Inkscape, that is the #1 thing I show them, and I'll show you why in a little bit. Okay, and then these are like really information-dense slides, but these are like the craziest slides in the presentation. It's easier from here on out, and I'm going through it fast, but this is so when I go through the actual demo, you see it in practice and hopefully kind of remember, oh, that's what she meant. So here I've called out, these are the regions of the keyboard, and I actually kind of watched myself doing a mock-up and tried to take note of when I pressed what key. These are the ones that I press the most frequently when doing mock-ups in Inkscape. And some of them I think you're going to be familiar with. Raise your hand if you are not. The basics where you do Control-Z to undo, Control-X to remove, Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste, Control-A to select all, Control-S to save. Is anybody not familiar with that basic keyboard shortcut pattern? Okay, so I'm assuming that you're all cool with that. So that being said, the things that, and if you're not, please say something, okay? So what I did is I called out the little shortcuts that are really important for Inkscape usage to kind of streamline a mock-up creation workflow that really aren't common in other applications. And the #1 is Control-D. We'll go into that in depth later, but just know that it will create duplicates of any object you've selected. Control-G will group objects. We'll go into that in depth later. The #1 key, I press this so much when I'm in Inkscape, and what it does is it will take what you've drawn on screen and put it at a 1-to-1 ratio. So where this comes in handy is, you know, when you're designing mockups, you're designing them for on-screen display. So if you draw out a big button like this, and you hit 1 and it's this big, you don't want your mockup to just be one big button. So you just keep hitting 1, and you might be working on fine details and zoomed in like at 500%,